So when you look at this from their perspective, which I would argue is completely pathetic and inferior and lacks common sense, and is highly influenced by fucking people, bias studies and so on and so forth. But if you look at it from their perspective, the idea is, if you look at it from the perspective that they're doing this to perhaps keep people safe and whatnot, which doesn't make sense because not all target individuals take such an aggressive stance that I have. Okay. First of all, the first thing that's painfully obvious, extremely obvious, is that you have violent criminals on parole. You have gang members who are not being targeted. Okay. That's the first and foremost. There are a lot of people who act perhaps even more aggressive than I do on a regular basis. When I interact with people in public, you see I'm very courteous. I'm a total gentleman, okay? Which kills the idea that this guy's a threat or something. You have gang members who walk around very intense, very angry, in a very threatening and menacing fashion. They are not in the targeted individual program. That kills any argument that they would have, hands down. I don't have to take it to the level of, that the people in charge are the dangerous ones and so on and so forth. If you say, well, which would pretty much be a useless argument anyway, because they're the people who run the system. So they're pretty much, unable to address them. Anyway, so as soon as, one quick way to completely rule out their argument, as far as it being fair or an illogical step to take, criminal history is the key thing here. Wouldn't it be much more logical for them to do it based on somebody's violent history? You don't see that with, somebody such as myself in his mid-30s. You also don't see that with the average target individual. There's an appalling lack of violent criminal history. Constantly they complain that they're not criminals. Why would they be put in this program? Well, how does it make sense? Okay. The next thing is the provocation. Can you truly say that by provoking somebody to anger, that you are actually keeping people safe just by having police on call or, on standby? No, you can't. Would it work in prison, for example? If you provoke, the prisoners to attack police officers and say, well, I have police officers on standby. This is just our way of keeping people safe. We're trying to provoke them so that they attack us and that we can lock them up longer to keep society safe. That would have, would make more sense, but it still wouldn't make sense. You're risking the safety of the officer and other inmates and so on and so forth. Is the cop going to fly in like Superman, fashion the speeding bullet and stop whatever violence may unfold? Or will they react after the violence unfolds? So therefore, the provocation in order to contain the threat, in order to get somebody's help, is not a logical argument either. You're basically, if that was the case, you're completely betting that this person will just act up in a crazy way and just nut up and not hurt anybody. And then you can, but if that is the case anyway, then why would you need to go to such extremes to get them help? So I think when you truly look at the facts, one cannot then make an argument that, well, these are law enforcement people, and so on and so forth. And then when you couple that with the fact that they're using gang members to help them out, they're using gays to help them out. Okay? No. And then when you throw in the fact of the suicide, see, the suicide is something that, it's an extra, but it's not really a strong point, because A lot of people commit suicide, from psych meds, and the system still does under the pretense of trying to keep people safe. So really the main point is the logical people to put in this program. I would argue this program is completely immoral, it's unconstitutional, it's inhumane, it is non-consensual experimentation. It's a form of it, regardless how you look at it, whether it is outright experimentation or whether that's a strong component of it, it's a form of it. And it is not fair. You're basically punishing people for what they might do, which is not a good policy to have. It's not how the law works. You don't say, well, I think that you're a shady character. I don't have the ability to force you into an institution. But since the law does not give me the ability to do that, I'm going to instead put you in this program. It's complete nonsense. I mean, just completely evil, way overstepping their bounds, way unfair, total miscarriage of justice. So then, now that we've ruled out that the justification behind this is to keep people safe, what then? I'd also like to wrap this up by saying it was my logical argument that makes it hard for people to say, the way I'm talking. People who are crazy do not talk the way I'm talking, and most people know that. It's not just people like me who study this that know that. They nut up and they start yelling in incoherent ways. Somebody yelling by itself is not enough to say this person's crazy, especially if they're a black male. Okay? Use the example of gang members shouting gang slogans, of sports people at football games, making noise. Under the right circumstances, it is quite common for black people to yell, for pretty much any people to yell, but especially black people. And it is quite common for a black person who's being treated unfairly to want to be very emotional and to have a pretty intense expression of their emotions. So can we then say, well, when you look at someone like me making this claim, I mean, you have to consider these things, whether or not you believe them. When somebody has a very articulate, logical argument and he presents it well, right away, you should be over the 50% mark that you should believe this person. He's not talking about aliens. He's talking about something that has happened time and time again. I could talk about fraternities that covertly drug women and rape them. I mean, this is something that happens every day, all of the time. Okay? And then when you couple that with other witnesses' testimonies, we've taken it over the 75%, okay, with those two things. And the lack of a motivation for them to lie takes it above the 80%. So that's where the 80% also makes a lot of sense when you break it down logically. And then you have to consider what type of people are smart enough to put it together as such. Well, that is most people, because there's a difference between that sounds crazy and that is quite a story, but extremely believable. And then that breaks down into the categories I named before in the last clip, of, the don't know versus jump to the conclusion they must be wrong and so on. When you see somebody who is as well researched as I am, people who are crazy and out of touch don't have 10,000 valid sources, okay? People who are mistaken don't have about something that has been going on for quite some time, okay? It'd be one thing if I said, well, I think that today they might have done it. But for someone who is a great researcher such as myself, who presents superior arguments consistently to make such a claim, it then makes one a great idiot not to believe this person. There is not a strong motivation for lying. The closest thing to it, we say, well, he claims to be the top martial artist. Maybe he just wants to have an excuse in case he loses. Well, I'm putting money on the line, okay? I'm putting a lot of money on the line, and I'm not rich. It's not going to cushion my fall in case I lose very much, I'm there'll be a lot of money lost there, And I have bragged specifically that even though they're drugging me, I'm still the best. So that is the closest thing to an argument as to why I might be lying. But when you truly think about it, when you truly listen to what I've been saying, it is pretty much void as well. And then you have to couple it up with the videos of me being drugged, right? And the poor performance. And then you have the videos of my mother coughing from the gassing. And you have the videos of the other testimony of other targeted individuals. When you look at the abundance of evidence, yes, only 8 to 10% of people are so stupid that they wouldn't realize that I'm right, that I'm telling the truth, and that I'm not mistaken. Someone with a degree in software engineering who is talking about something that's been going on for years, the idea that I'm mistaken about it is laughable. And the idea that people who play stupid think that somehow they're playing me out and not themselves is even more laughable. Thank you. So when you look at this from their perspective, which I would argue is completely pathetic and inferior and lacks common sense, and highly influenced by fucking people, biased studies and so on and so forth. When I interact with people in public, you see I'm very courteous. I'm a total gentleman, okay? Which kills the idea that this guy's a threat or something. You have gang members who walk around very intense, very angry, and very threatening and met. You have violent criminals on parole. You have gang members who are not being targeted, okay? That's the first and foremost. There are a lot of people who act perhaps even more aggressive than I do on a regular basis, which doesn't make sense because not all targeted individuals take such an aggressive stance that I have, okay? First of all, the first thing that's painfully obvious, extremely obvious, is that, but if you look at it from their perspective, the idea is, if you look at it from the perspective that they're doing this to perhaps keep people safe and whatnot,